I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co, and today I'm covering the games in my collection that have lasted at least 10 years. It's 2025 now. That's a long time, which means, and I've been in the hobby since late 2011, early 2012, which means it's about 13-ish plus years. I guess if it's start of 2025, let's call it 13 years in the hobby, which means all of the games that I'm going to be covering today, and there are 24 games that I'm going to be covering today, have been in my collection in some fashion or another. Sometimes there's reprints, like look at this over here. This game has not been in my collection, but the Castles of Burgundy has. But these are all games that have been in my collection since at least 2015, I guess. So the first 3 years of my board game hobby. Now, I thought of doing this video as I was midway through my top 100 and mentioning a few games that had been here at least 10 years, and I was like, I should do a full video about that. And so I am doing a full video about that. That's this video right now. But also, if you're getting slight feelings of deja vu, around a year and a half ago, I did a very similar video with a decent amount of overlap. Basically, I did the longest lasting games in my collection. I did that halfway through 2023, so around a year and a half ago, which means, again, if you are watching this, in that video, I covered 17 games. From those 17 games, 2 of them have left. Alien Frontiers has left, and Jambo has left. So 2 of them are gone, although technically Alien Frontiers had only been a coming back anyway. But with that said, today we're going to be covering 24 games, which means there are effectively, what's the math on that? 9 new games for you. 9 new games that were not in that last video. So if you did watch that last video, feel free to watch this or not. If you didn't watch that last video, either way, I'll link to it down below. I'm more just mentioning it in case you get deja vu, because as I was putting together this list, I was like, this feels familiar to me. Anyways, let's go ahead and dive into it. These are not in any particular order based on how long they've been here. A lot of them do have asterisks, especially if they are a new edition in some way, shape, or form. But let's start with the 2 oldest games in my collection. The rest of them are a little, honestly, give me a second here. Let's start with the 3 oldest games in my collection. Okay, these are the 3 oldest ones in my collection by far, and that's easy for me to say because these were all part of the very first orders I ever made when getting into the hobby. You see, I played board games once upon a time. I played Apples to Apples, Risk 2210. I played the original Game of Thrones, the board game, first edition, not second. I played Carcassonne. I did all these things, and of course Catan. And I did all these before getting into the hobby. But then in 2011, I played Arkham Horror. And then I played, a few months later, I played Small World, and a few months later, I played Stone Age. Actually, I think it was Stone Age then Small World, but I could be wrong. But I think it was Stone Age then Small World, but I played all those 3 games in 2011, and I was like, hey, these are a whole bunch of things that I never knew existed, and they're all pretty fun times. Arkham Horror actually think was a little long. I wasn't as into that, but Stone Age and Small World I loved, and I started looking into board games. And as part of that process, I ended up making an initial order on Cool Stuff Inc. back when they sold board games. I got all the Small World stuff. I got like everything. I was like, Small World is so much fun. Let me buy all of it. Absolutely all of it. I never had self-control when it comes to this hobby. So I bought all the Small World stuff from Cool Stuff Inc. plus some other things. I bought a order from Miniature Market, and then I bought a few things on eBay. Now, I don't remember all of the things that I've gotten. I don't remember all the stuff in my initial order. I'd have to go back and look. I think like Guillotine was my initial order. I don't know if I've ever actually played Guillotine, but I had it because I was so excited and into things. I think Pandemic was part of my initial order, but Pandemic is no longer here. Pandemic was one of my longest lasting, and there are still iterations of Pandemic, specifically the Legacies, that I love, but Pandemic in its pure form lasted for like 8-9 years in my collection, but did eventually leave. But Seven Wonders, Sentinels of Multiverse, and Castles of Burgundy were all part of the very first games that I ever ordered, and they are all here today, all of them in new versions, which I guess makes sense because it's been 10 years. Sentinels of Multiverse, I actually got in the original flat pack edition way back when. It was like the original edition before anyone had done anything, before they had turned into Greater Than Games, before they had come out with Spirit Island and all these other games, and I really enjoyed Sentinels of Multiverse, and then immediately upgraded to the new edition when they had that, and then down the road when they had this new enhanced version, I gave it a little bit of time, and by a little bit of time I mean like 2-3 years maybe, but then I eventually did try it. I had the opportunity to play this at PAX East, I want to say, not PAX Unplugged, PAX East 2022, I want to say I played it in. I'm pretty sure that was the year I played it. Might have been 2023. I'd have to go back and look. But either way, 2023. I played at PAX East in 2023, and I'm pretty sure. Anyways, and I played actually with the designer of the game. I didn't even realize that it was him as I was sitting down. I just like sat down to demo it. I was like, you know what? I'm fine. I'm here for the enhanced edition. So again, little asterisks on all of these. Castles of Burgundy never left my collection. Like these 2 never left. So these get no asterisks really. Even though they are new editions, they never left. This one did go through a period where between the definitive edition and the enhanced edition, this is the definitive. The enhanced was the last one. Between the enhanced edition and the definitive edition, I did actually get rid of of it completely and then got it back. And I do think it's an excellent game, and I enjoy it when I get to table it. So it is one that I'm happy is still here, but all three of these were part of my initial orders. This one has shrunk a little bit in how much it gets tabled. I still love it, and I'm still always happy to table it. Sentinels as well is one that gets tabled a few times a year, not a lot, and Castles is one that gets tabled on a monthly basis. This is an incredible experience. If you watch my top 100 games of all time, this is my current #1 game of all time. I love it. It's only gotten better with age. It's only gotten better with the deluxe edition as well. So these are the 3 oldest games in my collection. Outside of that, there's not going to be a particular order to it. These just all were like simultaneously my first games ever. This is, by the way, the miniatures box, because there's already enough stuff on the table here to deal with that I don't want to burden myself with the giant miniatures box. So again, we have 24 games to go through. I'll cover the next 2 that aren't actually here, just before I forget them, because they're not actually physically here. The 2 that I don't currently have with me are Innovation, and well, let's do them one at a time. Innovation I've had for 10 plus years in my collection. Temporarily it's on hiatus because I ended up gifting my copy to somebody else because I backed the new edition of the game. So I have the new edition, and again, that's one that's in my collection I think the entire, no, it did have gaps. It did have a gap where it left at one point, because I upgraded to the yellow edition and got rid of the original, but then the yellow edition never fully expanded, so then I got rid of that at one point, and then I got back the enhanced deluxe version of the last innovation. So it is one that is back now and has mostly been here, but it did go through a short gap where it wasn't there, and technically there's a short gap now because I bought this deluxe edition and then upgraded to the new deluxe edition when they had that on back kit a year and a half, 2 years ago, and I believe it's shipping soon. So it's not here currently. I only just gifted it like maybe 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, I don't know, not long ago, but I was like, the new one's almost here, I can afford to not play it for a few weeks, but it's a great game. I play it on BGA, I play it in person. Innovation is an excellent experience that does break some of the things I like about board games. One thing I generally don't like about board games is I don't like a game that forces me to read a ton of things or play suboptimally. Meaning, if my choices are, I have to either be on top of every piece of information on the table, and there's a lot of information on the table, or I could just not be and then play suboptimally. I don't love that, because then I'm like, am I trying to play strategically or not? And if I'm playing strategically, I should be aware of all your cards at all times, but I don't want to start every turn by rereading everything going on the table, and Innovation can have a lot of things happening. That said, I do let myself just lean into the chaos a bit. I generally know what's going on, and I think it's best at 2 players, by the way, but I generally know what's going on your side of the table, and I know enough, and if you catch me unawares, you catch me unawares, and we all have a good time, and it's fun. And I think it's a great experience. I think it's best at 2. It is still good at higher player counts, but 2 is where it shines for me, and I'm looking forward to the new enhanced edition, the new deluxe whatever, that gives you a full age 11 and tweaks and more stuff and all those things. I'm just looking forward to it because it's a great game. The other game that's currently not here, and this one I don't know where it is. I think I know where it is, but I'm not going to go grab it. I think I just realized where I put it. I think it's in the back room. Anyways, this is Timeline. I went to go grab Timeline for this one because Timeline is one that I've had in my collection for who knows how long, literally who knows how long. It's been a very, very long time. In fact, I think I have old stuff and I have new stuff for Timeline. You see, I have the original Timeline stuff. I have the Timeline big box. Asmodee has recently reprinted it, so I actually have the new stuff, but I think it's all in the big box. That's the problem. The problem is I store my Timeline in the bigger Timeline Challenge, which is not actually a great game, but Timeline, I have the box, so I have the cards from it, and I have it all stored in Timeline Challenge. But again, that's a problem because I was looking at my small box game shelf and I couldn't find it, and now I know where it is. Anyways, Timeline is an excellent game of trying to organize cards in a timeline. You have toothbrushes, and you're like, well, where was the toothbrush? Was it between 1970 and 1980? Was it between 1482 and 1723? And the reason you have these betweens is every time you add a card to the table, you create a new card in the timeline. So at the beginning of the game, you have one card on the table, one card, and you have to decide if your card goes to the left or the right. But as you get things right, you create harder and harder points to try to fit different things into the timeline. And your goal is to get rid of your cards, and when you're right, you get rid of a card. When you're wrong, you have to draw a new card. And so you're constantly trying to figure out where things were, which makes it both an incredibly educational game, but also an incredibly interesting game when you realize is that toothbrushes was not invented in 1970, it was invented in 14-something. I think it was like invented in 14-something. It's a little insane. Sometimes you are generally in a range, and sometimes you actually learn something new about when something was kind of brought into fruition. Now, not all editions of Timeline are created equal. There's also like card line and other alternative things that are similar, but not all versions are created equal. Some of them, like scientific discoveries, are less interesting because most people aren't going to know when a certain microbacteria was discovered, or when a specific island in the southern Pacific was found. And so if you don't have some sense of when something happened, it is going to be a less interesting game. The part that's interesting is the fact that you're like, oh, it's a rocket ship. Rocket ships must have been invented in 1980. And you go back and you're like, wow, that's a really, really long time ago. So it is a fascinating, interesting game, and it's one that is easy to table for a long time. For the 8 years plus, it was my go-to recommendation for a gateway game that worked with everyone. It still is great, but I do find myself recommending Baron Park more so nowadays. Although there's actually Canvas is probably my newest one that I recommend a lot from gateway games. Anyways, from there, in no specific order, let's go with two abstracts over here. Yinsh Tzaar. When I discovered the Yinsh series, I discovered it with Yinsh. This is when I first got into games and I was trying to like look everywhere and find everything. And so I've heard about Yinsh, and then Yinsh led me down the rabbit hole of the GIP series, which is an entire series called GIP, which is one of the names of the game in the series, but also the name of the series. And the GIP series has had like 7 games by now, maybe 8 games. But I got almost all of them. I don't think I've ever had Tamsk. Tamsk is like a timer one. I don't think I've had that. I think I've had every other one, and the ones that have been the longest lasting for me are Yinsh and Tzaar. I do like all of them, but I find that I love some of them and like all of them, and Yinsh and Tzaar are the ones that have lasted the longest. Devon is also pretty good, but I find Devon can fall into patterns a little too quickly. But they're all good. They're all of good things. Link has elements of all combined, but I find I prefer those elements more separate. They are all great games, and these two are my personal favorites of them. They are a series of abstract games with black and white pieces. Generally, there's some other colors. Devon has red, Link has a little bit of everything. There's usually black and white is the core focus, and then it's just instead of abstract rules as far as different things going on. I don't know what the current status of these are as far as are they currently in stock, are they being reprinted? At one point I saw them being reprinted as square boxes. I like these versions personally, but they have been around for a very long time. They have beautiful pieces. They have a quality to them, a nice sheen to them. They are some of the best abstracts I have. Yinsh I describe as Othello, but not broken. And Tzaar, I don't know if I described as anything. It's just a great game with several ways to lose and force your opponent into losing. And it's a fun challenge to try to be on your toes about all of those different elements at the same time. These are both great abstracts that have been some of the longest lasting in my collection. Again, these are all my 10 years plus over here. We have Fantome De Opera. Fantome De Opera is one that isn't the best game in my collection, but I do find it ends up getting tabled on a regular basis. It's just one that, this is the best version of Mr. Jack as far as I'm personally concerned. I don't think it's the most popular version, but there's Mr. Jack Goes to New York, there's Mr. Jack Pocket. I feel like there's others too. Is there Mr. Jack 2? Is there? I can't remember. But there is Fantome De Opera. Fantome De Opera takes the same system of Mr. Jack, and to me it is the most thematic and overall just the best. I've played Mr. Jack a lot. I've enjoyed Mr. Jack a lot. I've enjoyed all the iterations of it. I've had Pocket, I've had Mr. Jack, I've had Mr. Jack Goes to New York. I don't know if I've had any others, if there are any others, but Fantome De Opera is the best one to me. It is the most thematic in terms of the level of what's going on that makes it more sense, so to speak. The whole nature of being frightened, of trying to hide, of who's the Phantom, all that. And then it also just has the best gameplay elements as far as the characters go and their abilities, and the most interesting board where it's not just hex-based, it's a very fascinating little puzzle. Again, I think all the games in the series are good. This, to me, is my favorite, and one that, again, I'm almost surprised that this is still here. But every time I look at it as to whether I should get rid of it, I'm like, I play it, I enjoy it, it comes out, and as long as that keeps happening, it's going to stick around. Now, Le Havre is one that I have gotten rid of at one point. When I first got into the hobby, I went heavy down the rabbit hole of Uwe Rosenberg games. I started with At the Gates of Liang. I think I did. No, I must not have. I must have started with Agricola, because I was looking at things that were popular. So I must have started with Agricola, I think. I went from there to The Gates of Liang, and then Le Havre. Possibly others I don't remember, or Laborer. I don't remember all the early Uwe Rosenberg games that I dove into, but I do remember that Le Havre for a long time was one of my favorites, and then at a certain point, after years of not playing it enough, I did choose to get rid of it, but it's one that I realized I came back to because it consistently delivers one of the best experiences. It is very comparable to Or at Labora. If you are someone who loves Le Havre, you should definitely check out Or at Labora. I think you'll enjoy both. The question is whether you'll feel a need for both, or want one or prefer one or whatnot. For me, with limited game time in all things, the games are a little bit too similar, that ultimately Le Havre is the one that I keep, but they are both fantastic experiences. This is basically turn resources into other resources and build buildings and use buildings that will help you achieve that little engine of, well, resource conversion, resource production, and all that, while you do a little bit of feeding your people, sort of. We have Cuzco, which is very, very new, but also this was Bora Bora and has been in my collection for a very, very long time. And again, it is tricky here because I'd say about half the games, if not more, half of the games here, oh my gosh, we should do a count. At the end of this video, from the 24 games that we have, I'm going to do a count of which ones only have their original edition, because I'm guessing, if I had to guess right now, granted I've kind of peripherally been glancing, I would say that 7 of them have their original edition. Okay, 7 have the original edition, I think. It might be less than that. Anyways, Cuzco. Cuzco is the better version of Bora Bora. Bora Bora is a great game that I've loved by Stefan Feld, that has tons of abilities and powers and islanders, and trying to use a fascinating dice mechanism where higher value dice are generally better, but they give you less restrictive, but they're more restrictive as far as placement. So you're trying to figure out how and which dice to draft and place in order to go ahead and get all the things you need done. But Bora Bora was excellent, and Cuzco is prettier and better as far as the gameplay elements go. This is the Svanfeld City Collection from Queen Games. Generally, I find that from the ones I've played, I find that they're generally either better or better looking, but not usually both. This is the one that for me is both. From there we have 5 Tribes, one that has been around for a very long time, and from the ones on the table so far, Le Fantome's going to be original. So I don't know how we count these. Yinsh Tzaar have new additions, but I don't have those new editions. We can count this however you want. But Le Fantome is the original one. Le Fantome only has one, the original edition. 5 Tribes has the one original edition. Granted, there was a reprint right away because they had this thing with slaves that then became fakirs. So that was a change, but that was a right away change. And Le Havre, again, this is the complete edition, but this was right away back then. So complete edition, this is the one I have. I'm going to count this as original. Either way, 5 Tribes. Designed by Bunakathala, put out by Days of Wonder. Again, I found Days of Wonder with Small World, I then explored it with Ticket to Ride. I've tried a whole bunch of things in the Days of Wonder line. At one point, anything Days of Wonder put out, I was going to get from the past or from the future. At a certain point, I stopped. I think I stopped by The River. The River is the point where I was like, you know what? Not every Days of Wonder game is a hit for me, even though 5 Tribes was, Small World was, Ticket to Ride was. There were a lot of great games. I had an entire shelf of Ticket to Ride once upon a time. Arguably, you could say I still have Ticket to Ride in my collection. Ticket to Ride probably is a 10+ year. Interesting. I do have iterations of Ticket to Ride. Ticket to Ride should probably be on this list. It should be on this list over here. But 5 Tribes over here. 5 Tribes, the Djinns of Nagala, is an excellent Mancala style game with tons of powers and abilities, which I love powers and abilities. A lot of ways to try to figure out how to get points, which I love as well. It can feel like a Stefan Feld game in the way this is constructed. It has Mancala elements. It has point salad. Everything you do gives you points. It is a very satisfying experience. Arguably my favorite Bunakathala game. I'd have to think what else he's designed. Did he do this one? There's one I'm looking at over here, which I think might have been him, but I'll have to check. But either way, 5 Tribes is an incredible experience, charming, and again, it's been around for a very long time. I remember when the expansions came out. Like, when the expansions first came out, like 2015-ish, something like that, people were like, oh my gosh, I have to get the new expansion for 5 Tribes, it's great, and I've said this before, I think I have both expansions. I have to double check if I have both or only one. We have Brass Birmingham, which again, depends how you count this, but I have the original Brass. No, I had Age of Industry. So there's Brass and there's Age of Industry, 2 older games. And then Brass Birmingham came out from there. So again, you could count this with an asterisk if you want. But I had Age of Industry and played Age of Industry well before, in the 10-year mark, I have had that. I've never had the original Brass, so I never had this technical game. But the 2 games are very, very closely related. There are marginal differences between them. And honestly, you could play one. If you play, let's say, Age of Industry, and then 2 years later you played Brass, you might not realize they are separate games. They are very similar, which again is why Ticket to Ride should probably be on this list as well. So 25 games, I guess. But Brass Birmingham over here is designed by Martin Wallace and Gavin Brown and Matt Tolman. They're going to have a new edition of the game coming out as well shortly. Well, I say shortly, but like on crowdfunding shortly. I believe 2025 is the plan for it. But they have Brass Birmingham, Brass Lancashire. I've enjoyed both. I do think Birmingham is overall better. There are parts of it Lancashire that I think are a little better, but the overall package, Birmingham is one that I'm going to pick. And this is not a game where I play it enough that I need 2 iterations of the same basic game. But the production value is incredible. The game design is incredibly tight. It's been in my top 100 consistently since I've had this, and that's because it just gives you an incredibly rewarding Euro experience. There's a reason it has stuck around for as long as it has. I have like pictures of me and my game group playing Age of Industry like 10+ years ago. It's an old one. It is an old one in my collection. It has lasted for a very long time. And again, technically different games, but very much similar to me. From there, we'll do 2 small boxes. We have No Thanks and Coloretto, which again, technically have new versions of. I'll count what I have new versions of. That's what we'll count, okay? Because I can't count everything. Coloretto's had like a new version. I actually got the new version of Coloretto and I didn't like it, and I went back to the old version. I just like the art I didn't love. So I never actually got rid of this, fortunately, because I think this is better. And No Thanks, I assume, has more versions. I'm pretty sure I've played new versions, but this is classic and it works well. But both these games are small box games that have lasted for a very, very long time for me. No Thanks is a simple game of player reverse bidding. You're trying to basically you're bidding not to take a card, because cards are worth points, negative points, and Cards are worth points, and points are bad for you. But the tricky part is, as you get cards, you actually only count the points in the lowest string of cards. So for example, if you have an 11, you've lost 11 points. If you have a 10 and 11, you've only lost 10 points. If you have a 10 and 12, you've lost 10 and 12 points. So if you have a consecutive string of cards, then you only score the lowest one, which means there's a fun little aspect where you can afford to take certain cards based on the cards you already have in front of you, and when you're reverse bidding, you're bidding chips that are worth negative points that decline your point value, which again is a good thing. You want a low score, so every time a chip goes into the middle because someone doesn't want to take a card, you can get that. Which puts this fascinating puzzle of what's the right point to take a card, and how far can you push the other players who want to avoid that card. Always a good time, delightfully mean, delightfully short, accessible, easy to play, and the same can be said for Coloretto. Coloretto is about trying to get your sets of the 3 best colors, but anything above 3 colors is scoring negative points. So if you have 6 red, 6 green, and 6 yellow, that's amazing. But if you then have 6 blue, those 6 blue are scoring negative points, and it is an escalating amount of points for each amount you have. Meaning effectively, one card is worth 1 point. I think it's 1, 3, I think it's the usual pattern, 1, 3, 6, 10, 15, 21, if I'm not mistaken. So effectively, if you have 3 cards, that'll be worth negative 6 points. If you have 1 card, that'll be worth negative 1 point, if it's in the color you don't have. But that results in, again, an interesting challenge of trying to grab groups of cards that have the colors you want, that penalize you less, and being mindful of the other players as well who are also vying for colors. Both games are easy to teach, easy to play in a short time frame, handle multiple players well, and are delightfully mean and fun, and they are still here for a reason. From there we have Quest. Quest is not an original implementation. This was originally the Resistance Avalon specifically. This box does have the Resistance Avalon inside it. This is the Avalon Big Box Edition, but Avalon has been in my collection for a very, 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 very long time. I played Resistance, the regular one. I played Resistance Avalon. I prefer Avalon. When Quest came out, I liked the artwork and presentation better. I like the fact that you can play it with 4 players, where Avalon has a minimum player count of 5. I do not table it as often as I used to because I just find the way my game group works out. I used to have like a regular party of like 10 plus people. Not 10 plus, I lied. I used to have a regular party of, let's call it 6+ people that would show up for various events and whatnot, and we'd play a lot of these party games. That changed like years ago, like 5-6 years ago, but pre-COVID, before everything went down with COVID, that nature of that kind of changed, and I didn't have those groups as often, and so games like One Night Ultimate Werewolf, games like Quest, they do get played far less often, but I love having them for when we have those groups because they play so well when you have a good group of people who is willing to sit down and be a little bit devious to each other's faces, and Quest gives you new ways to do so within that universe. And again, it still has the Resistance Avalon inside if you just want to play that basic version of it, specifically this version of Quest. Not all versions of Quest will. So this one, been in my collection for 10+ years. We also have Dixit, which I still have the original Dixit that I've always had. This just happens to be the Disney edition that I grabbed off the shelf, but I still have all the original Dixit. I don't know if I have all the expansions for it. I don't know if I need all the expansions for it, but I probably should buy all the expansions for it because, well, I want to. It is a game that still gets tabled. It is a game that still is fun. But between the 5 expansions that I had from the original game, between the Disney version, I do have plenty of Dixit. But basically, the general idea of this game is it's a party game where you're trying to give loose clues, but not too loose and not too specific. Then all players are going to try to play a card that matches that clue. So you might say brooding, and then players play a card that match brooding. And then the other players are trying to vote on what the original brooding card was versus what the other players are putting out. So you're trying to figure out who better matched a certain word. Because you might say marbles, and you might do something that has bowling balls, and you're thinking bowling balls are similar to marbles, it works. Someone might literally be able to play a card that has marbles on it in the art, and the art is all amazing and trippy and loopy. I think the Disney edition is a nice version to have. I do recommend, if you're just gonna get one, I probably recommend base Dixit. I think it's a little bit more loopy, a little more freeing. Dixit is locked into certain patterns because of Disney's locked into certain patterns because of the nature of what it is, but both have fantastic games. I remember playing this when I first, this was probably right after, the Stone Age and Small World, because I remember there was a couple friend that I played with way back when, that was way back when I played this one with, and they had played Stone Age and Small World right after I discovered them, and I remember playing this with them. I remember him liking it, and her not so much. Anyways, from there, we have Kemet. Kemet is again in a new edition, Kemet Blood and Sand. I've had the original Kemet. I played the original Kemet. I loved the original Kemet because it was a great game. And then again, this goes back far enough that this is a game that I remember, this is before, having this predates me having regular game nights. And there was a time when I remember I managed to loop together some friends. I taught them how to play this game. And then after the 40-minute teach, one person, and by the way, I can teach Kemet nowadays much faster than 40 minutes, but back then I couldn't. I wasn't as good yet, and so I just figured out what to do. And again, Kemet right now I probably teaching you in 20, maybe 25 minutes. But the reason I taught it in 40 minutes to some people, and then my friend stood up. One of my friends at the table. There were 5 of us there, but one of my friends stood up and was like, I have to go now. I didn't realize game night was going to be this long, and I thought we were going to like hang out and play apples to apples or something. Not really apples to apples. I told them what we were playing, but they didn't realize that the teach alone could be 40 minutes, and he wandered off. He has since played other games, but now I am a lot better at warning people and knowing who the target audience is and not trying to loop in friends just because they are a warm body, but rather trying to find gamers specifically to play games with me. But this is Kemet, Blood and Sand, an excellent game. This is just the newest version of it. We have Glass Road, which technically got a new version by Capstone, but I don't know if there are any changes to it. I think it's more of a reprint as opposed to an actual new version, but I do think Glass Road is excellent. I think it delivers a great Uwe Rosenberg experience. It is one that I've gotten and gotten rid of a few times because it doesn't always get as much play, but then I realized it is one of these shorter Uwe Rosenberg games. It offers a very different experience than his typical games, and it is one worth having in a collection just for the differences, the ease of teaching, and the accessibility. You kind of get an Uwe Rosenberg experience, but you get it in like 45 minutes to an hour. So overall, I think it's just a much better, not much better, it's a much different experience than his usual fare and worth having if you appreciate what he's doing. We also have Through the Ages, a new story of civilization. This is, again, one that has gone through several editions. There's like the original edition way back when. I think I got like the 3rd edition and whatnot, and then they reprinted this one, and I, of course, made sure to get this one because Through the Ages is a incredible civilization game. I remember the first time I was getting this, I agonized. I was working with very limited budgets as far as my ability to spend money on games had to be, to some extent, justified by playing those games and all of that. And so I remember I spent a long time watching multiple videos on the internet trying to figure out whether I should get Through the Ages or Sid Meier's Civilization, because I loved Civilization, so I should probably go with that as like the better defining Civilization experience. But Through the Ages was generally recognized to be a better game by most people, and eventually I bit the bullet and went with Through the Ages. I've actually never played Sid Meier's. I played Sid Meier's A New Dawn, so I played the new version of that. I never played the original, never got around to it. I had it in my collection at one point, but I never actually tabled it. Versus Through the Ages is incredible and fantastic, designed by Vlaada Chvátil, gives you, I think the difference is, sometimes a game that works well on a computer doesn't work as well when you adapt it to tabletop. This is thematically Through the Ages. It works. It delivers. Honestly, I should do a video series. I think I meant to once upon a time. I don't think I ever did it. I have to double check if I did it, going back to Deja Vu and stuff. But I had an idea for a video series once upon a time that I think I still want to do, where it talks about the actual game and the game that did it better. So you might have an actual game, so Sid Meier's is an actual game, and Through the Ages does that better. And there are lots of other games that I think are meant to be adaptations of something in one way, shape, or form, and then there's a better version of that adaptation. I may have actually done this. I'm trying to remember if I did this, because I have several, I think I've done this. I think I've done this video. I've either put together notes in the video or I've done the video. I'll check after this. If I've done that video, I'll link to it down below, because Through the Ages versus Sid Meier's should definitely be on that list. Although you could argue that I haven't played Sid Meier's, so it's not eligible, and I'll argue that I played New Dawn, so I can count that instead. Then we have the other Bruno Cathala game that I thought was on this list. I was like, I do think Bruno Cathala designed a game I like more than 5 Tribes, and that is Cyclades. Cyclades, which will have a new edition shortly, but it's not here yet. Cyclades over here is, and this one I refuse to get rid of until the new edition is actually here, because I almost played this last night. There was a chance of me playing Cyclades last night. I played Coimbra instead, which is great because I haven't played Coimbra in years, but I almost played Cyclades last night. It was between Cyclades and Coimbra, and we chose Coimbra. I'm happy with both those choices. Cyclades I played more recently, so I was interested in tabling Coimbra, and man, does that hold up. Anyways, I've had Cyclades for a very, very long time. Designed by Bruno Cathala, my favorite Bruno Cathala game. I think this is my top 10 this year, if I'm not mistaken. It has consistently been in my top 20 since I've discovered it. It gives you bidding on gods in order to do an area control game. And I love the premise. The premise is you can't attack unless you bid for Ares. You can't build ships and move around the waters unless you bid on Poseidon. You have to actually have the favor of the god to do anything. So thematically and mechanically, it breaks all the molds of what you typically expect in an area control game, which is such an incredible experience, and I think the Legendary Edition did such a good job at it. I do think the Legendary Edition does not look as good as the original, but honestly I think the same of Kemet, Blood and Sand in the original. I think sometimes cleaning up an edition of a game doesn't always do the game's favors, and it does depend on the game. We have over here Trois over here, which is, again, this is one of the games, actually, when people say, like, what's a game that could use a great new edition, I think Trois would benefit tremendously from a new edition. Okay, granted, I might then see the new edition and be like, the art in the Ultra is better. Sometimes cleaning up a game is not good. But there are great new editions of games. Like, a lot of these games over here on the table have new editions, and I'm not complaining with them. Happens to be Kemet and Cyclades, I think, have improved gameplay elements, but the actual art doesn't necessarily look better. But Tzaar has been here for a very long time. Recommended to me by a friend a long time ago, who actually recommended another game over here I'm about to get to. Haven't talked to him in years, but he was into solo gaming as well as, well, non-solo gaming, but he's very big in solo gaming. Recommended a lot of games. He taught me about he recommended Hopalocus to me way back when, got me onto chip theory before anyone knew what chip theory was, and obviously not before anyone. When chip theory had Hopalocus, they were a startup company that no one knew about really. It took a long time before they became the behemoth to a certain extent that they are. And behemoth in the board game space does not actually mean behemoth. It just means that they're now a well-recognized, established company that, you know, has a large presence, versus back in the day, they were like, hey, we are some brothers who, like, made a game in our garage and we're selling it. It's called Hopalocus and it has chips, and that's what we are. We're chip theory games. It was bizarre, but that's not on the list right now. What's on the list is Tzaar, who he taught me about this game, and it's an excellent Euro that does hold up. The game he did teach me about, or recommended to me, was Clash of Cultures, which I have played the original edition. I still have not played this edition of the game, despite trying to several times. It has not happened. It needs to happen. It will happen. It just hasn't happened yet. But Clash of Cultures was one recommended to me by my friend as well. And again, the original edition has been around in my collection, was around my collection for a very long time before I replaced it with this edition that I still have not tabled. And also is a great Civ game. If you want another great Civ game, this could be you can make an argument that Clash of Cultures is also in the vein of Sid Meier's, as well as Through the Ages as far as the experience it delivers. And then we have Dominion. Dominion over here, in this box over here. Dominion is a deck builder, and it's one that I've had in my collection since getting into the hobby. This is one of the ones that came shortly. I think it was in my second wave of purchases, not in my very first, but I think it was in my second wave of purchases, and it's one that is still great. I still love it. The app has reinvigorated my love for it, but my love never really went away. It's just, you know, it's a game that has always been tabled, is always fun. It works great 2-player, works great 3-player, slows down a bit at 4-player, but still is an experience that I would have and enjoy. It's great. I should play this more. Oh my gosh, I should play Dominion. So when it comes to Dominion, I don't usually think of it as a game that I'm going to pull out at a 3-player count. So I usually end up playing this at 2 players, but it is so good at 3 players, I should pull it out at 3 players. I should be playing this more at my game night. I should. It's a great experience that holds up. And then lastly, again, a new edition for this, we have Kingdom Builder, Empire Edition, the last game for me. Game number 24 out of 25, because I'm going to count Ticket to Ride. I'll throw it on the timestamp somewhere. Ticket to Ride should be on this list. But Kingdom Builder, I have the new edition of it. At one point, I switched to Winter Kingdoms, but then I went back to Kingdom Builder, because I think Kingdom Builder holds up and delivers a better experience. Even though there are things I like about Winter Kingdoms better, I think Kingdom Builder overall does a better job. Which means for the recap / end of this video, I'm going to count 2 things. I'm going to go over all the games and see which ones have stayed here forever versus which ones have had gaps. And then I'm also going to go over which ones have had a new edition that I have or have coming, the new edition. So, to that end, No Thanks Coloretto. So 25 games. We're going to talk about the gaps. No Thanks Coloretto have always been here. Brass Birmingham, I've always had either Age of Industry or Brass Birmingham. 5 Tribes always been here. Bora Bora, I actually got rid of at one point, so I can't count that one. Castle Burgundy's always been here. Sentinels I got rid of. 7 Wonders has always been here. That's 6. Glasswood has had gaps. Cyclades has always been here. Through the Ages I got rid of for a year. I got rid of it. I was like, it's too long. I don't table it. But I got it back because it's so good. So, but I can't count it here. Kemet I've always had since I've had it. Kingdom Builder I swapped for into Kingdom at one point. Clash of Cultures I got rid of the first game before I got this one. So it does not count. Yinsh and Tzaar have always been here. That's 10. Fantome De Opera is 11. That's always been here. Le Havre had a gap. Dixit did not have a gap. That's 12. Tzaar did not have a gap. That's 13. Dominion never had a gap. That's 14. Actually, Dominion did have a gap, but I'm not going to count that. And I'll explain why in a second. Quest never had a gap. That's 15. And then, was it 15? Am I counting right? Give me a second. No Thanks Coloretto, Brass, 5 Tribes, Castles, 7 Wonders, Kemet, Cyclades, Tzaar, Yinsh is 10. Dixit is 11. Tzaar is 12. Did I get to 15 somehow? Tzaar is 12. Dominion is 13. Quest is 14. Okay, so maybe 14. Maybe I did this slightly wrong. I don't know exactly. But then the other ones are Timeline has never had a gap. That's 15. And what was the last one I don't have here? Innovation did have a gap. So Innovation did have a gap. So 15 out of the 25 games and Ticket to Ride, I have had gaps. But Dominion, the reason I'm not counting as a gap is there was a brief period of time where I got rid of my entire Dominion set, and then I literally got it back from the person I got it back. Like, almost immediately I had regrets, and I traded back for it and managed to make it all work out, covering all the shipping, because I specifically my set had all the stuff, it was sleeved a certain way. I immediately had a regret, so I'm not going to count that one, because that gap lasted like 2 days. As far as the games that are in their original edition, as far as I have them, so we have No Thanks Coloretto, 5 Tribes, 7 Wonders has second edition, Kemet has second edition, Through the Ages, Cyclades. Nope, Cyclades has a new edition coming. I'm not going to count that. Glass Road I'll count as the original edition. I don't think there's any major changes or reprints. Yinsh Tzaar, and again, they have new editions, but I haven't gotten them. Fantome De Opera, Le Havre, that brings us to 8. Trois is 9. And Dominion, I have the entire second edition, so I can't count that one. And then for the ones I don't have, Timeline, I have new stuff. I have the original stuff for Timeline, I'll count that. That brings us to 10. And Ticket to Ride, I have other versions of it. And I have the original edition too. 11. We'll count to 11. So 11 games are in the original edition. 15 games have never had a gap, and 25 games total that have been in my collection for at least 10 years. In any case, until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. And let me know in the comments down below, let me know 3 games that you've had for at least 10 years, and or your longest lasting, literally. If you can think of your original 3 games that you still have, that's even better, bonus points for that. But otherwise, just 3 games you've had for at least 10 years. Doesn't mean, not a game that's been like, I have El Grande, that's a 1995 game or whatever it is, but I didn't have it for 10 years. I got it later, so that's not counted here. You have to have had it for at least 10 years. It had to have stood the test of time for you. In any case, and until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. I hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, I hope you have a good one.